Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Diego Lopez of Giving Up All Hopez, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you following UFC 325, phoning it in for the Aussies. I think I went 27 minutes on the preview of this one. I'm hoping I can get 25 out of the recap, because this was not a strong card, and it was main evented by a fight that most people went, are you sure about that? You've got Alexander Volkanovski, one of the all-time greats of the sport. Don't get into the, who's the featherweight GOAT stuff, but he is one of the all-time greats. He's on a second title run with a, sort of pretend belt, because Ilia Topuria took off to the lightweight division. But he's one of their last stars. He's trying to set some records, and instead of matching him up against young challengers who are actually interesting, like Lerone Murphy, Movsar Evloev. Not interesting in the way that you or I thinks of interesting, but interesting as in a new matchup for him and someone who probably deserves a title shot. They instead gave Diego Lopez a rematch. But this is still a step up from the rumoured rematch with Yair Rodriguez, who hasn't done anything in forever. So it was a strange matchup. People pointed at the excitement of the first fight because there were two moments where Volkanovski got into trouble, which allowed Lopez to take 2 rounds on a couple of cards. But this one was cruise control. I think Volkanovski, on the official scorecards, got every round. I struggled to give Diego Lopez like a convincing round. So when they announced this fight in the first place, I thought that this was like the easier fight. I thought they were giving him an easy title defense because he's fighting someone who he's shown has no clue how to fight him. Rather than the guys like Evloev and Lerone Murphy who, maybe Volkanovski beats them. I'm not going to write him off because he's one of the all-time greats, but they're definitely not the sort of champion you want. So I think that the UFC made the decision to have an easy defense against a fairly exciting opponent rather than risk one of their remaining stars on losing to a boring opponent. Oh, and Aljo's ranked at featherweight now too. So, yeah. But yeah, the thing with Diego Lopez, and I tried to be very respectful in my pre-fight stuff, I did put out a thing with a thumbnail that said horrible footwork and his face on it, but I tried to say, obviously he's enormously powerful, and he's a very skilled grappler. His issue is that he can't make exchanges happen, which is all his footwork. You can watch, he's beaten good fighters. Sadiq Youssef, Pat Sabatini, had a good scrap with Evloev. But the difference isn't that Volkanovski's magic, the difference is that Volkanovski's moving, and he's a moving target. So there's very few matchups in the history of the UFC that have been as clearly down to the footwork and the ring position as this, and we knew it would be, and Diego Lopez went away from the first fight and said he hadn't trained in a proper cage before. He'd only trained with, wall panels. So the assumption was that he knows his footwork's shit because we've all seen it shit and everyone said it's shit, and that's why he lost the fight. And then he came into this fight and he did nothing different. Well, he did a couple of things different, but his ringcraft was still dreadful. He created no pressure on Volkanovski. At no point in the 5 rounds of action did I think he'd trapped Volkanovski and was going to tee off on him. And Volkanovski even gave a joke in the presser afterwards. He said, I'd circled to my right the entire first fight, which is what I talked about in that pre-fight video. And he said he tried to cut me off when I did that, so I circled left and he had no clue. And literally he goes back to his corner and his coach says he's got no idea what he's doing when you circle left. It's just insane. Because, you don't learn to cut the ring off by the guy circling one direction. You learn to cut the ring off on someone who's changing directions and making it hard. So I don't know how you go away and you learn to step to your left, but you don't learn to step to your fucking right. Just crazy. But what Lopez added was that he switched to southpaw and he threw some kicks, which I suppose came from watching the Islam Makhachev fight, because, even before the Makhachev fight, we were talking about, how do you abuse your height and reach and range advantages against Alexander Volkanovski? And we talked about how Makhachev has the advantage of being a southpaw, so you just throw kicks above the waist on that side. Body kicks, head kicks. And then all the elusive head movement in the world doesn't matter because you're matching up against his forearm, basically. But Volkanovski, he's still a mobile target, so it wasn't just like he stood there and let Diego Lopez kick him. The one thing that did happen from that was that Lopez was standing more upright. Where in the first fight, he came out, and if you watch his fight with John Silver, he does the same thing. He comes out in this guard where his legs are a mile apart, and he leans forward at the waist and puts his head out there on a platter, but then has a high guard. And it's how Mendoza is drawn in old pictures of him. He was a bare knuckle fighter from the London prize ring days. Jewish guy, directly related to Peter Sellers, weirdly enough. But he was the first Jew to meet a British monarch. He was like revered in his day because he invented the idea of letting a punch miss instead of just absorbing it as best you can. But any picture of him, or in his own little book about fighting, his guard is like the Diaz style, hands way up in front of the head, lean forward so that they can't reach your body, because back in the bare knuckle days, everyone was terrified of the body shot. Nowadays, people just don't bother doing them. But it made it very hard for Lopez to move in the first place, because if you're leaning over your front foot, you've then got to get your hips back under you or stand up before you start moving. Trying to kick more, he's actually standing in a higher stance. He's not crouched down. He's not leaning forward at the waist. And he can move a bit more comfortably. He's a bit more mobile, almost by accident. So that was quite impressive, because in the first fight, there were a few moments where he came up out of his stance and he stood upright a bit more and double and triple jabbed and got Volkanovski moving towards the fence, and he never capitalized on it, but he was able to make some ground and actually stay in range, or, you know, almost in range with Volkanovski, and make stuff happen, whereas most of the fight he's getting jabbed in the face because his head's out there, and then trying to swing back and just falling forward because his shoulders are already so far ahead of his hips. But aside from that, it was the same old shit. It was more of the same. It's nice that Volkanovski gets a free title defense. Love that for him. Love that for the Australian fans who turned out to see him. But what a waste of everyone's time. Anything notable from it? Volkanovski with the crackdown, which was interesting, because Thaleson Teixeira did that in that heavyweight slog earlier in the card. The crackdown is the head outside single, and then you bring them down onto their hip in that weird sort of sitting position. It's the property of the unexplosive grappler. So Jake Shields was amazing at it. It's a takedown that gets the guy down into a weird position where he's not fully down, you've not dominated him, but he's in like a technical exchange with you. And it links nicely with guard passing. And Volk was also looking for his cross buttock, Osotogari, whatever you want to call it. I mean, we're talking about, I mentioned London prize fighting days already today. But 1700s boxing, they fucking loved the cross buttock, which is it's a rough version of the Osotogari, which is where you step your lead leg behind their lead leg and throw them over it. And we saw John Jones against the Ghost of Stipe do this. We saw Piotr Jan do it against Davison Figueiredo a couple of times. But using kicks to set that up, because how do you get how do you cross step without the guy seeing it? Normally you get him checking and then you step behind it. Sanchai was phenomenal at this in Muay Thai. He would sling guys down on the back of their head. He didn't knock a lot of people out standing. Like, his hands weren't particularly heavy. He'd get the odd head kick, but he left a couple of guys like concussed on the mat by throwing them. By getting them checking, stepping through and like sweeping their back leg or just throwing them over his leg. So the way that Volkanovski was cross-stepping, if you haven't watched the video I did, go watch that. Kind of set up that attempt at the Osotogari, but he's done it like 4 or 5 times to Diego Lopez across 2 fights, and I don't think he's ever actually got him off his feet with it. Whereas Piotr Jan and John Jones, they threw the side kick a load so that they could pick their leg up to their chest, make it look really like they were going to stomp on that guy's knee. He'd pick his leg up, and then they just put their leg down behind him and swing him over it. It's a lot, you can get in a lot easier, whereas Volkanovski has to sort of jump in and doesn't end up close enough. It's like his calf is behind the opponent's calf, whereas you want to get like cross buttock. Landed a ton of great right hands, landed a load of great kicks, did a ton of that inside low kick, step back, southpaw right hook when the guy comes forward, but was just never troubled. Really, I was watching this going, by round 2, it's obvious this guy hasn't changed anything, because whether he wanted to bang it out on the feet or grapple, he needed to close distance and make something happen. And he can't do that. He wouldn't be able to do that if they were standing in an open field. Joe Rogan's basketball MMA idea would be extremely tedious. But the advantage of fighting under rules and having a boundary Unless you don't have a boundary and it's like Soul Calibur and you can ring out them. Or, what's the name of that? Is it Ganryujima? Something like that. There's a Japanese fight promotion, which is like traditional Chinese Lei, standing on a platform, and you can win by ring out, or knockout, or submission. And there's a Russian one where they do fights on top of a shipping container being lifted by a crane over a body of water. It's like, wow, someone's going to die doing that if you have enough events. But that isn't the case in these fights. If you fight in a ring or a cage, you have a boundary to push the guy against and force those exchanges and force a second exchange after the first exchange. And I think the real annoying thing about Diego Lopez and so many other fighters is that they fight one exchange, reset, another exchange, reset. I brought it up in the video, but go watch the Topuria Volkanovski fight. There are lots of moments in that fight where Topuria is pressuring towards the fence and getting jabbed in the face. And it doesn't matter because he's going to win the next exchange. Or he loses an exchange and then he flows into a second exchange. You know, throw a combination, it fails or misses, but you've moved the guy back towards the cage, you throw a second combination. And there's none of that in Diego Lopez's game. He was entirely relying on Volkanovski jumping in and him hitting him with the counter uppercut, which worked once in the first fight. And I think he caught him out of position with a right hand, with a right straight, when Volk just managed to cross himself up by accident. I've been harping on about Team Lobo footwork for a while, but man, their game plans are... If your game plan was to stand in the middle of the cage, that was stupid. If your game plan was to cut the cage and you then gave up when he started circling the other direction, that's bad too. And it's really annoying because this guy's enormously physically talented and technically pretty skilled. Like, the difference between technique and tactics and strategy and stuff is you can have the nicest mechanics on your punches in the world. If you can't then use your feet to make that happen, you're impotent. You know, you might as well not have any punches. Meanwhile, the Topuria brothers are out here doing great things by having an overhand and circling the guy onto it along the cage. That's literally how Volkanovski got knocked out. So what's next for Volkanovski? Something real, I hope. What's next for Diego Lopez? Back to the drawing board, bro. You know, this is the thing. He could beat a load of other guys in the top 15, never having to learn his footwork, never having to improve anything about his ring craft. But it made all the difference in the world here. We're talking about the elite of the elite. We're talking about Alexander Volkanovski. And you're not going to beat him by hoping he slips on a banana peel when he enters an exchange with you. Co-main was Benoit Saint-Denis versus Dan Hooker. These boys were banging. To give my Threads-style commentary, these boys are banging 10-9 Hooker, round one. That's how you get on TV, be one of the 4 people with a Threads account, and give just the most generic take you've ever seen. They're not putting my take about Kai Kara-France looking like a small, angry Richard Kind on TV. But if you write them boys are banging, 10-9, whoever, you're on. I thought this was a good... This is a hard one because it's a good showing from Dan Hooker that ends with him getting finished. So, he didn't have the best showing in the world against Arman Sarukian. The guillotine still looked dangerous. It is a curse and a blessing, the guillotine. It's kind of like having a good guard. The more you get good at the guard, the more inclined you are to stay in a shit position. The better you get at the guillotine, the more inclined you are to put yourself in bad situations. Not bad situations, but like pursuing that finish. You might put your back to the floor. You might roll over the top of them. You might lose them. I mean, that's how he ended up with Sarukian on top of him. Was it both times or just the second time? But Sarukian did a full Exorcist, almost break my own neck roll inside Hooker's closed guard. It's so powerful, though, particularly the ninja choke style deep V guillotine. If you can get one, you know, your forearm and your bicep down the carotid arteries with their windpipe in the crook of your elbow, rather than just trying to like pull your forearm up through their windpipe like you're actually guillotining them. It's very, very dangerous. And the great thing about locking like a ninja choke with the figure 4 bicep grip, the rear naked choke grip, but from the front, is that you don't need a guard. Like if you get the grip in good and the guy can't slip free or change the angle on his neck, you could choke him out from him mounting you, as long as his head stays where it is. I thought this was DC hacked me off earlier in the night by being like, just saying weird shit, but like Taito Ivasa loves to fight. It's like, actually, he pretty much doesn't. He's been out for 4 years or whatever because he doesn't love to fight. But he said something. He said that body kick's going to get Dan Hooker in trouble. And then later in the round, he's like, oh, those body kicks, they're brilliant. They're taking it out of Benoit Saint-Denis. Blah, blah, blah. I saw some people make fun of him, but the difference, when he says body kick generic, he means round kick to the body, which will get caught a lot of the time. When he said those kicks are taken out of Benoit Saint-Denis, he meant the front kick with the ball of the foot, which is a lot more difficult to deal with. It is the wrestler killer. I've said it 100 times, but his fight with Mateusz Gamrot, all of Dan Hooker's success came off front kicks to the body. All of Gamrot's takedowns came off parrying front kicks to the body. It's like, that's the gunfight. That's where it's going to play out. But he was really digging into Saint-Denis with those front kicks to the body, whereas Saint-Denis is just, for better or worse, he accepts what he does on the feet, and it's big left high kick, big overhand. And it works, because he rattled him enough with a high kick right off the bat that Dan Hooker immediately kicked back and Benoit Saint-Denis almost took him down. This is what Beneil Dariush learned very early as a sensational grappler coming to MMA, training with Cordero, so in a hard sparring environment a lot of the time. He learned that if you're a southpaw and you throw a good left high kick and a good left overhand, or a good left straight, you have more than enough stuff to worry the guy or get him into a fist fight. And as soon as he throws back and he thinks he's in a fist fight, your takedowns become much more available. But Hooker was doing a great job of defending himself, because anytime Saint-Denis committed to getting in on the hips and trying to get the locked hands double along the fence or anything like that, Hooker put him in the V of the elbow and almost snapped up the ninja choke or the guillotine. If you watch his fight with Mark Jacasey, he forces Jacasey to shoot on him in every round and almost finishes him with the guillotine in all 3 rounds. I think he does in the end. But Saint-Denis, fair play to him, was looking for more interesting things. He was grabbing the overhook on his own terms and looking to hit Uchimatas and throw Dan Hooker. And it was Dan Hooker wrestling back that got him into trouble, unfortunately. I'm always saying, like, if you're a good all-round fighter and you're fighting a one-dimensional grappler, you should look to take him down because it'll spook him in the area where he wants to be. But Hooker stepped round for a trip and ended up on the bottom underneath mount with an arm trapped in, so it was mounted triangle. And mounted triangle's hard to finish, but you can absolutely destroy the guy with strikes from there. And it was really interesting, this one, because it was this one and Diego Lopez's last fight against Jean Silva, where you got to see someone use the mount well. And for years at this point, I've been saying the only guy really using the mount well in MMA is Glover Teixeira, who's since retired for a couple of years now. But guard passing as a skill in MMA doesn't need to exist. It's something you don't need. If you were building like the basics of a fight, or if you only had a certain amount of points to apply to your video game fighter, guard passing is not something you would bother with, because you can, if you can hold top position and grind on them with elbows and things. Arman Sarukin is a great example. You can do enough damage from the top of closed guard to stop someone if you're fucking trying. Umar Nurmagomedov talking to you. Guard passing is a really niche skill because it works against someone else's like educated technique. And the only reason you need to pass guard properly is to pursue submissions from the top, which most people aren't that interested in, or to mount. But when you see someone get to mount, you're like, oh, this is a pretty solid position. And now, with the downward elbow rule changing, it's much more effective. Diego Lopez got mounted on Jean Silva, and Jean Silva wrapped his arms around Diego Lopez's waist and pulled him forward so that Lopez couldn't sit up and drop awkward straight punches down on him. Lopez put one hand on the floor, leaned out over the top of him, and started dropping elbows on the top of his head and split him wide open. And Benoit Saint-Denis' work from the mount here was similar to that. It was nice elbows from all angles. When Dan Hooker put the elbows up high and pinched his forearms together, Benoit Saint-Denis lined up an elbow straight down the centre, the old Muang Thai punchy elbow. Linton Vassell, very good at that. Linton Vassell mentioned 2 of the year, and there's only been 2 cards. When he gets on top and starts dropping them Milton Keynes concrete cows on you. But yeah, poor old Dan Hooker got TKO'd from mount. It was a good showing from Hooker, and it was a good showing from Saint-Denis. Saint-Denis still taking a lot of damage to do what he do. But he's scary, man. He's a scary top player. I just wonder, like, because Moicano obviously got on top of him and just obliterated him. I just wonder how, when he fights someone who puts him on his own back again, how's that going to hold up? That Beneil Dariush fight was super interesting because Beneil Dariush has something like 90% takedown defense against really good grapplers in the top of that division. That was why I always wanted to see him against Makhachev, but his chin just went to shit. Aided by an enormous weight cut, I imagine. And then the other good fight on this card was Mauricio Ruffy versus Rafael Fiziev. I thought this was a lot of fun, this matchup. With the first 2 cards of the year, it's been like the fight that you look at ahead of time and go, that's the fun fight. It was the fun fight. But I'd seen them together and I didn't expect Ruffy to be so much taller than Fiziev, because Fiziev fights quite high in his stance anyway a lot of the time, and Ruffy fights quite long in his stance and low in his stance, and he was still towering over Fiziev. Fiziev pressured him to the fence well, had a lot of trouble because he couldn't commit. I think he wanted to get in and punch the body, and he was very much spooked by Ruffy throwing up a couple of knees, which came nowhere close, I don't think, through the first round and almost all of the second round. Obviously, we had that amazing knee knockout on the undercard. It was Kichiro Nakamura knocked out Sebastian Sisley when the fajitas come out sizzling. But yeah, he'd been losing that whole fight, and then he just caught him ducking his head with a knee. He'd actually done it, the exchange before that. They clinched up, and then he exited that clinch, and he did the same thing as the guy came in. But Ruffy used the knee to spook Fiziev from level changing too much. So Fiziev was moving his head side to side, but he was keeping it over his shoulders. He never really lowered it. He threw the odd kick to the body. He did a lot of sort of like shifting in to punch the head, but it was noticeable that he did get some good low kicks in, and I thought that was great because obviously you're fighting someone with a long stance to begin with. But it just looked like he'd get Ruffy in position with his back foot on the fence, and then he wasn't comfortable tearing into him and putting that attritive damage on him. And then he was thrown off by Ruffy's jab, which looked sensational. Very strange quirk of Ruffy in this fight. He landed that jab a load of times, and then 3 times in this fight, because it turned out to be like the knockout punch or the TKO punch, but I'd been going, oh, that's interesting. 3 or 4 times in this fight, he'd established the jab, and then he faked the jab with a shoulder feint, but very obviously didn't throw the jab, paused for a second, and then threw the right hand, which is unusual to see because, like, if you've got the jab and you don't want to commit to it and you want to throw the right hand, you normally just flick it out anyway. You flick it out in front of their face, even if you don't touch them, just to blind them momentarily, and then you throw the right hand immediately behind it. Trying to remember who it was did a whole thing on like the rhythm of the 1-2. And you don't want it to be 1-2, you want it to be 1-2. But anyway, yeah, big shoulder feint, throws the right straight off it, and he went straight through Fiziev, like he blasted his head back half a foot. And he caught him with that several times, and then knocked him down with it in the second and followed up for the finish. Yeah, people were saying, like, why didn't Fiziev try to take him down? I think he did a couple of times. He just didn't really get any purchase. Obviously, Ruffy had so much trouble off his back against Saint-Denis. That was obviously what people wanted to see. Because Fiziev immediately came out and took down Justin Gaethje last time he fought, or the time before that, rather, because he fought Bahamondes most recently. I think the things that were missing from this fight for me were bodywork from Fiziev, but he seemed spooked by Ruffy's knees. And then clinch work, because Fiziev used to be a very strong clinch fighter, like a striker from the clinch. It was him and Piotr Yan, who obviously both train at Tiger Muay Thai. And there was this whole thing where people were going, oh, they're bringing Muay Thai to MMA, him and Peter Yan. Because they did hit these like sick little trips to off-balance people out of the clinch, and then they'd whack them with an elbow or a high kick. That's how Piotr Yan got Uriah Faber. That and waiting until he was 45. But yeah, that seemed very absent. I haven't seen that from Fiziev in a while. If you watch his early UFC fights, he's still striking into clinches, threatening to throw the guy, smashing him on the way out of the clinch, and then coming back in with more strikes. This one, he was very much tit for tat, point fighting. Not point fighting, but, you know, trying to score a good hard shot and then breaking off and then trying to score another good hard shot. He was going 1-for-1 with a guy who's an absolute sniper. And that style, you know, when you're at a physical height and reach disadvantage, that style is, or that type of fighting is always going to favor the guy with the extra half a foot where he can hit you that you can't hit him. So I didn't think Fiziev looked bad. I thought Ruffy looked really good. But I do feel like the last 3 Fiziev fights I've watched, I'm just going, where is that dude? Where's that guy who was just a buzzsaw? Taliesin Teixeira versus Tai Tuivasa. Oh! Fucking top 15 heavyweights, mate. Just dreadful. I don't know what's up with Tuivasa. His nose got redder every clip I saw of him weighing in and stuff. He went to Dubai to hyper focus or whatever, and they both came out looking like trash. Crazy, because I've talked about this before, like they gave Taliesin Teixeira a main event last year, which was insane. And I had to look through his dreadful fights and try and glean stuff from it. And it's just him being 6'7" or whatever and using a jab against homeless guys. Tuivasa was able to get in, push him to the fence and beat him up a little bit here. Taliesin Teixeira shot a single leg and took him down into a crackdown. It was just dreadful. Let's not talk about it anymore. Billy Alicana versus Junior Taffa, expected to be dreadful, was dreadful. Cody Brundage had a fight, that was dreadful too. Jacob Malkoun versus Torres Finney. A lot of people going, how do you feel about Malkoun suddenly getting great hands? I'm going to tell you, I think it's because it's Torres Finney. I mean, it was great seeing him land the jab constantly, build off the jab. He was jabbing and then he'd break free and then he'd shoulder feint the jab and throw a whipping left hook around the back of the parry, or he'd throw a jab and then slap down the lead hand and shoot the right straight down the inside. Like, it was perfect how to build off a jab. It's just that jab was landing because it was Torres Finney. Like, I saw him struggle on the feet against Cody Brundage. I just don't think he's doing it. And he did hit his single, which I popped for, but I think Torres Finney's just not very good. Though I love Jacob Malkoun. Like, his only losses in the UFC were when Phil Hawes caught him cold in 10 seconds and Brendan Allen got a shady decision over him. Oh, and Cody Brundage got a DQ via elbows to the back of the head, but, he was getting beat up the whole fight up to that point. I saw someone say that Torres Finney got spooked by Malkoun's last fight where he knocked out Petrosky with his hip because Petrosky has one of the all-time worst chins in MMA. Jonathan Mikalev versus Oban Elliott, I quite enjoyed. I thought Elliott looked good. And he afterwards said, that was the best performance of my career and I still got slept or whatever. But I saw some people liken Mikalev to Dricus because he's Dricus is a switch hitter, but Mikalev's an awkward southpaw who looks really slow, but then seems to catch you with off rhythm, lean back right hooks. Like Elliott was so much obviously faster than him, and he's still getting clipped with these counters and getting wobbled by them. And it reminded me what Evander Holyfield used to say when they asked him about fighting George Foreman. He said he's so slow that you'd slip a punch, come back onto line, and the punch would arrive and hit you. But I thought he was having trouble in the early going because Elliott was so much faster than him. He got a bit of his timing together, and then he finally got his takedown, got the back, and got the choke. So good for him. Anything else good on this card? The great knee from that Sisley versus Nakamura fight. I quite liked Sisley. He's got a weird sort of point karate background, and I was watching him fight with his lead leg turned in, and I'm going, please, kick that leg, because either you buckle his knee and hurt him, or you knock his foot out from under him clean because you're kicking in the same direction his toes are pointing. If you ever want to easily sweep someone's feet, pull it in the direction that their toes are pointing. But Nakamura was throwing high kicks and body kicks and stuff, and Sisley was using those as the opportunity to enter with a 3-punch combination. I was just looking at this going, the blueprint is out there for the floaty point fighter. Spam hands, jog into low kicks. Get them backing up and kick that trailing leg. Don't stand there and try and kick the leg out in the open because they'll force feed you the right straight. But didn't matter because in the end he got kneed in the head. He was having a great performance and then one knee, bonk, done. Other road to UFC tournament fights, wasn't super impressed by them. Cam Roston looked good, but he was fighting Cody Brundage, who has one of the most ridiculous records in recent UFC history. Oh, and Killen Salkeld versus Jamie Malarkey. Yeah, I thought it looked good. It was nice to see a little bit of grappling after last time where he showed off his striking. Malarkey hit a nice takedown on him, actually, in the early going. And then Salkeld hit a beautiful... I think DC called it an Iranian throw, but I thought it was a Polish throw. I will obviously defer to him on what the people on the circuit are calling it in wrestling. But where you hook the leg around the side and then you hop round and sit down so that their leg is trapped between your knees as you fall. It was a beautiful throw, and then he got his rear naked choke submission. This is a sad one because Jamie Malarkey took this fight on short notice. Clearly, he's been losing a lot lately. He's been knocked out 4 times in the last 3 years or something like that. Took this fight on short notice. Might get cut off it, which would be brutal. But Honestly, at this point, I think he should be retiring. Is that the lot? Have I done the lot? Yeah, it was fine. There was some boxing on the weekend. There was obviously a big fight between Teofimo Lopez and Shakur Stevenson, and it's always a question of what Lopez is showing up, but we'll do that on the Boycast. And honestly, next week's card looks more interesting to me than the 2 numbered cards we've had this year so far. We got Mario Batista versus Vinicius Oliveira, like Mr. Technical versus just the wild man who just fights bizarrely but is so much fun. You got Emir Albazi versus Kyoji Horiguchi. Jean Matsumoto versus Farid Basharat. You got the other Basharat versus Said Nurmagomedov. You got Kong Wang turning up on the card. You got Gafarov, who's always fun. You got Chelton Almeida against Rizvan Kuniev. We used to make Rape Van jokes, now we make Rizvan jokes. And you got Mikhail Oleksichuk, who's on a little bit of a career resurgence after moving to the Fighting Nerds. Always had a weird sort of southpaw striking style, but seems to be coming into his own now. Helped along by fighting just not very good opponents in his last 2, but I'm quite excited for this card. I'm more excited for this card than I was for the last week's card ahead of time. But yeah, check out the YouTube channel for my video breakdowns. I might do another one this week. Sign up to the Patreon to get in on the extra stuff like the Boycasts and my articles, and I'll catch you when I catch you. Taffer Brothers, contracts for life because they live near the stadium. Bless.